Be a listener this morning to Dr. Kemp as she shares. Dr. Kemp is a professor, a visiting scholar at Franklin and Marshall University College. She's the winner of the Advos Dignity and Dialogue Award in 2018. She's the author of the book Say the Wrong Thing, Stories and Strategies for Racial Justice and Authentic Community. And she's trained over 25,000 people to have more open-hearted conversations about racism and compassionate community. We are also, as a faculty, taking this very seriously, and we're offering as a course to all of our faculty members over the next 5 weeks a course in anti-racism with Dr. Kemp. So she's going to be with us as a faculty, and actually a couple students are participating in that training as well over the next 2 months. So we're so happy. Join me in welcoming Dr. Amanda Kemp.
Good morning. I want to talk with you this morning about implicit racial bias. And I know that we're on a strict time schedule, so I'm not going to try to tell you everything that I would normally communicate, but I want to give you some snippets to think about. So this first piece I'm going to read from my book, Say the Wrong Thing, is about me. I'm looking this way as well as that way. It's called, If You're Black, Jump Back. If you're white, you're all right. If you're brown, hang around. If you're black, jump back. Children's rhyme. If you are unprepared to encounter interpretations that you might find objectionable, please do not proceed further. Harvard University Implicit Association Test, also known as the Implicit Bias Test. I was a tornado of a little girl. I had lots of energy and imagination. I made up songs and dramas and acted them out by myself if no one wanted to play with me. I loved the social life and the intellectual challenge of elementary school. I can't remember not knowing how to read. I loved nap time in kindergarten. I loved cookies for jobs completed in first grade. I loved my second grade teacher's turban and her long arm of bracelets. She was light brown and bought me a notebook. I did not like being black. I did not like my dark brown skin. I did not like the jokes, the criticisms, and the presumption that I was not pretty because I was dark-skinned. Don't turn off the lights. We'll never find Amanda. Would always get a laugh. I wasn't good at put down, so I would smile and pretend I did not care. I felt guilty as charged. I was black. I didn't know of any insults for being brown, tan, yellow, coffee-colored, etc. I grew up in the 1970s in a predominantly black and Puerto Rican neighborhood. It was an insult when I was growing up to call someone black. I remember someone saying, "I'm not black, I'm brown." Yes, this was the time of James Brown, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud, but it was also the time of only lighter-skinned women being featured on mega magazines such as Jet. Many of you probably don't even know Jet magazine because it just recently closed. Jet magazine's Beauty of the Week. All of the new television shows and movies of the 1970s that featured black women featured women who were lighter skinned, unless they were playing asexual mammy characters. Think of Julia, or even Raisin in the Sun. To comfort me, my foster mother would say, "Don't you worry, baby, you getting lighter every day." I was the only dark brown girl in the family, and I hope she was right, because the only other dark brown person in our house was my foster brother, a teen who was always in trouble. Eventually, I started fighting back. In junior high, a group of boys would pick a girl they thought was ugly and scream at her in the hallway while we changed classes. I'd watched them do it to several girls, all dark brown. I was in the smart class, I had glasses, I had crooked teeth, and most importantly, I was black. I waited for my turn. When they finally screamed at me, I just kept walking, as if I didn't see them. I don't know if my friends were with me, but I felt alone. One of the boys stepped in front of me and said something, and I opened my mouth. "You are no dreamboat yourself," came out. And I kept walking. All of his friends, thank you, all of his friends laughed. They were shocked that an ugly girl had hit back. They were shocked at my word choice. I know, because they said so. Later, when I was in my final year of junior high, a boy shouted as I passed by, "You look like an African queen." This is a black boy. Now, in my neighborhood, even if we had mostly gotten to the point of not denying we were black, we were emphatically not African. Notwithstanding the black nationalists, the Nation of Islam, and other folks who had countered the narrative of Africa as a dark continent, most people in my world at that time did not respect, value, or claim any connection to Africa. Therefore, when he put African in front of queen, I heard it as mockery. But what I said was, "That's the best kind." I tell you these stories because I've battled to see my skin color as sensual, rich, and one of my best features. I have fought despair and loneliness when I was passed over because I was dark brown, because I was too dark. When I read about dark brown women characters choosing navy and brown clothes so they wouldn't draw attention to their skins, I went out and bought yellow, red, pink, and white. After I graduated from college, I was approached by my friend Luis, a Mexican American. I tried to explain my hesitance to date him. I liked him a lot. He was really cute and artistic. But I said very gently, "I'm really black." I'll never forget his reaction. He literally fell down on the hiking trail laughing. I tried again. "I am not a by-the-way black person." I love this story and promise to write about it another time. I am now, at the time I wrote this book, I was almost 50. Now I'm a little bit past that. I am now almost 50. Studies show that colorism and white supremacy persist, but I resist. I have degrees and certifications in African and Afro-American studies. I've taught and lived on the African continent. I've organized black students, represented black community interests, organized in support of African liberation movements. I have built an identity around actively fighting for black art, black complexity, black traditions, black intellectual history. Therefore, I approach Harvard's implicit bias test with a high awareness of color preference in our society. I chose the skin tone implicit bias test without a lot of forethought. 10 minutes later, after I took the test, I got my results. I had, quote, "a moderate preference for light skin relative to dark skin." Despair. I had battled and lost. My unconscious, the realm out of my control, had learned, if you're black, jump back. I didn't like my results. Yes, I had grown up in a white supremacist society. Yes, I had gotten messages my entire life all around me every day that light is better than dark, that white is better than black, etc. It's understandable. But still, I did not like my results. Immediately questions rose. My children, one brown, one tan. Do I prefer the tan one? My stepchildren, blonde and brunette. Do I prefer the blonde ones? My husband, blue-green eyes, gray-white hair, white skin. Do I prefer white men? Light men? I do not like these questions. If you're white, you're all right. If you're brown, hang around. If you're black, jump back. But I sit with them. I commit again to find and declare the good, the beautiful, the powerful, the smart, the lovely in blackness, in dark brown people. Thank you. So I've shared that essay a few times. When I first, launched the book, it was I hadn't told those stories out loud in public before. And I remember when I first did it at a gathering of Black women, I literally got a rush at the table afterwards of all these dark brown women. So, who were of different ages. So this whole thing about implicit bias, implicit racial bias, I want us to look at it as something that we all have some work to do. We all have some work to do. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what implicit bias is. And then I'm going to tell you the steps that I've created that I think will help you to counter it. Before I do that, can you just raise your hand if you saw the Jerry King video on what implicit bias is so I know how many people saw it? Okay, so just a few. All right, awesome. Great. And I thought that maybe I would have some fun and do something I've never done before, which is do some giveaway things, sort of in the midst. So in case I get boring, but you're really interested in the giveaways, you'll stay with me. That was kind of a joke. I don't think I'm going to get boring. But I do have some things I want to give. So it's Black History Month, right? Yes. So I have a question for you. Can you tell me a famous, super important African American who was born enslaved, who became an abolitionist? This is all in the 1800s. And whose birthday is in February? Stand up, whoever said that. You, come on up, you get a prize. Okay, I just want to say I'm super impressed because I didn't know Frederick Douglass's birthday was in February until yesterday.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. That's awesome. All right. Okay. So I'm going to start with the slideshow so I can stay on the time. Okay, can you guys see any of my slides? Okay, good. All right. So stop the hurt. 5 steps to stop implicit racial bias. I'm going to tell you first about my why. This is my why. This is my brown child. This is my brown child, my oldest. This is my son. And my son, when he was a junior in high school, he sent me an email. And I opened it up at work, as you might do, just because, your kid sends you something, you just open it up. And I was shocked when I read what he wrote. I'm gonna share a little bit of it with you and put a little bit of it up on a slide. He said to me, Mom, take a look at this. I wrote it at 3 a.m. today. I wrote it not knowing where it would take me, but by the time I got to the end, I had diagnosed myself and identified my problem. He said, at least once a month, I see a video of a Black man beaten or killed by police. My parents and loved ones tell me to be careful. They tell me to do things I shouldn't have to do. But if I want to survive, I have to listen. I have to make sure I'm not a threat. Because if I make someone scared or uncomfortable, they can shoot me. They can shoot my ass and get away with it. I've been internalizing these messages for the last 4 years, and it's changing my body. It's changing my brain and my emotions. It's making me go into survival mode where I, a human being, become an animal. Because that's what I'm constantly being told I am, and how I see people like me being treated. It's beginning to be too much to cope with at times. People say things, Or I watch a video of a handcuffed man's head being kicked like a football by a white dude with a badge. These things flip a switch. My body feels like it's going to detonate when it's reminded that where I live, I am not safe. I don't have the same human experience as white people. I have to be on the lookout constantly, like prey in the wild. When I'm triggered, I don't have control of my body. When an animal is running from a predator, it's not thinking about anything except survival. I am 16 years old, and I know that feeling. And he goes on. And when I got this email, I sent him away to a school so he would be safe. And I realized I can't guarantee his safety in this country. So if you ask me, like, Amanda, why do you do what you do? Why do you facilitate conversations? Why do you teach people who have varying levels of commitment and interest in racial justice? Why do you choose to do this work? And I'll tell you, that's my why. I want to make this country safe for my kids and for other mothers' kids. And we can't do it until every one of us is using our power and our voice wherever we have it to stand for racial justice and to be willing to look inside ourselves at where we have absorbed the bias in our society against blackness. So I wonder what motivates you. I wonder if there's a who, a person, or a what that motivates you to want racial justice or beloved community. Just take a moment to think about it. So whenever we talk about racism, tensions rise. No matter where I go, tensions rise. And they rise because for some people, when we talk about racism, they feel like frozen, panicked, lose the voice, lose the breath. And for some people, tensions rise because they're used to having a lot of arguments. Like they have a voice, they're not frozen, but they're not used to listening. And then tensions rise because some people are just so tired of talking about this. This is especially, I find, with older people of color. They're like, okay, I done had 10 conversations explaining to usually European Americans X, Y, Z, I'm just tired. Well, I have another way of doing things, and I call it racial justice from the heart. And it involves taking care of ourselves, looking this way and looking without. So as was mentioned earlier, I've done presentations for more than 25,000 folks now. And this is just a little potpourri of folks who recently were working with me from different sexual orientations, gender identities, professors, youth workers, retired folks. This is just a collection of folks who I've worked with recently. And one of the things that I know, if we're going to shift our society and the way things are going, if we're going to shift it, we have to be grounded in something far deeper than our egos and our intellects. We have to be grounded in something far deeper than our ego or our intellect. So for you, that may be God, that may be Jesus, that might be a divinity by another name. It might be your deepest, widest self. But it needs to be grounded in something bigger than your ego or your intellect. So holding space for transformation, I'm going to show it to you, is a tool that I use when I want to slow it down and I want to stay connected and in my power when I'm in a difficult or in a stressful situation. I'm going to show it to you really quickly because I want to talk about how you can stop implicit racial bias. So what you want to do is have your feet on the ground. Can I lead you through it? Would you practice it with me? Okay, so get your feet on the ground. And next, send your attention to your breath. Just breathe in your nose and breathe out of your nose. And again, in your nose and out of your nose. Now send your attention back to your feet and really connect them. Put a little more weight into your feet. Now send your attention to your heart center and just imagine that you can breathe into your heart and you can breathe out of your heart. And then just silently to yourself, say, I am unconditional love. I am unconditional acceptance. Or you might say a brief prayer. And it could be, may I be of service. Use me, Lord. I'm here, Lord. It's real brief, whatever works for you. And as you let that little brief prayer echo inside you, if your eyes were closed, go ahead and open them. So just notice how you feel right now. Just notice how you feel in your body. Maybe in your heart, a little bit of your state of mind. Would anybody be willing to say out loud how they're feeling right now, what you're noticing about your body, your heart, or your state of mind? Grounded. Who said grounded? Can you stand up? I got a prize for you. Come on up. So, yes, you want to be grounded. What's your name? Lexi. Lexi? Thank you. You want to be grounded because your power comes from being grounded, not from being out of your body, sort of like somewhere else trying to avoid. You want to be grounded and connected to something bigger than yourself before you start to have the conversation. So I wasn't the person to make this up, holding space for transformation. My mentor, Neonu Span, who's on your, who knows whatever side that is, on your left, introduced me to that concept. And then Ricardo Levins Morales helped me to apply it in difficult situations. And if we had more time, I would go more in detail on that. But the bottom line is that we want to be grounded and centered in our hearts when we talk about race and racism. Because when you come from a place of love and self-care, then you have capacity, you have spaciousness to listen to someone else's story. So by you listening to me share my story or stories about growing up, how I grew up, that creates the way you listen to me and the way you applaud it, it created a space of belonging for me, because you showed me that you could hear something tender and hold it. So that's what holding space for transformation is like. It's like being able to hold something tenderly. But we're going to talk about implicit bias a little bit more. Implicit bias, implicit racial bias takes place in a field. It takes place in power relationships that have already been established. So I was born in 1966. By the time I was born in 1966, if you think about Africans having been in this country since 1619, we were about 300 years in. Or 350, you know what I'm saying? So already before I was even born, all kinds of traditions and assumptions and stories about black people and what we could and couldn't do and what was good or bad about us was already pre-existing. So I was born into that conversation. And so were all my friends, and all the boys who were yelling at the girls, they were all born into that conversation. And that conversation is one in which historically, legally, socially, economically, where black was suppressed and found less than, and white was elevated and found more than. Now, everybody in this room who would qualify as white today wouldn't have qualified as white 100 years ago. Some people had to really work their way into whiteness, some ethnic groups. I'm gonna leave you with that little seed so you could be saying, what is she talking about? I hope you'll bring it up with your teachers. Okay, so there's this field of white dominance, but what is implicit bias? And what I thought was really helpful was when we think about the brain as this amazing instrument that is digesting 11 million pieces of data each moment. It has to do some things on automatic. Otherwise, we would be moving very slowly if we could move at all. So it's automatic. It has to function. It has to make snap associations and decisions and assumptions based on what it was previously exposed to. And we all have this. If you're human, our brains are making snap judgments, assumptions, associations, dialing something down to emphasize something else. That's what it does. So I like this quote from Timothy Wilson, and he says that mental processes that are inaccessible to consciousness, but that influence judgments, feelings, or behavior, when he was defining the unconscious. Inaccessible, but they influence judgments, feelings, and behaviors. I think that's important to keep in mind. So when we think about implicit bias, what we know about it is that it's unconscious, it's contrary often to our stated values, and it involves rapid associations between people, attitudes, and objects. So here's something from the medical field. Dr. Chapman writes that we know that if we test a person's bias towards people of color or any other kind of minority group, people tend to favor white people. This is in the US. They tend to favor the majority group in general, and that holds true for physicians also. How many people in this room have a black physician, like a black medical doctor? One person. Awesome. Anybody else up on the upper level? No. Wow. Okay, great. Thank you. And how many people in this room have a European American physician as a medical doctor? Okay, great. And how many people in this room have someone of a different ethnicity as a medical doctor? Uh-huh. Awesome, thank you. So what this Professor Chapman's research shows is that physicians also tend to have a bias for or toward or in sympathy with white people, European Americans, and less toward people of color. She goes on further to say that even if you are of the minority category yourself, you may have that preference toward whiteness. it's not as strong. But even kids as young as 3 years old have a tendency to prefer white faces to black faces, regardless of their own skin color. So I brought these two quotes because I wanted you to see how early it starts and how it's in even the most noble professions where people are trained to value human life, such as the medical field. So I'm going to see if I can get us to how do we stop it? How do we stop the hurt? Number one is we have to build awareness about it. So let's stop saying, is there implicit bias, to saying, where is implicit bias happening in this school? Secondly, remove things that encourage stereotypes. Remove visual and audio things that encourage negative stereotypes. Third, add video and audio that encourages positive associations between people of color. Add audio and visuals that encourage positive associations. So I want you to think about your playlist. I don't have a playlist because, I'm way behind. But I'm sure you have plenty of playlists. So think about your playlist. Who are you listening to? What kind of stereotypes are they encouraging your brain to have about people of color? Go towards the fear. So this is a little tricky, but we all have demographics that we fear. Ethnic, racial, gender groups that we have a little instinctual clenching on. And what we know is that that fear gets reduced when you move towards it rather than when you stay away from it. And then finally, we got to be able to talk about racism. We got to be able to talk about racism. Now, you could do those 5 steps on your own, and I encourage you to do it. But we know that real change most often happens in community. Real change, transformation, happens when we have community support, when we can help each other see each other, when we can love each other even when we're not feeling loving of ourselves. So I encourage you to do it as a community, to do it with support. On March the 25th, we're going to do a worldwide Stop the Hurt, Stop Implicit Bias 5-day challenge. So it'll be March the 25th through the 29th, and I encourage you as a school to participate with us. I will be sure to give the information to your teachers, to, tell me your name again. Professor Charles, so that you know, and if you'd like to participate, you can participate with us. All right? So it's 10:32. Oh, I would love to say more, but I can't. I've promised that I will stay here for a few minutes if you'd like to talk with me. I'd love to talk to any of you. Peace and love to you all. Thank you.
You're good. Oh, you are good. You're good.